I want to turn to a passage of scripture here today that really is one that's always kind of caught my interest. It's a passage of scripture where Paul and Peter have a confrontation. Galatians chapter number 2, starting at verse number 11, says this, "But when Peter was come to Antioch, I withstood him to the face, because he was to be blamed. For before that, certain came from James, he did eat with the Gentiles. But when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing them which were of the circumcision. And the other Jews dissembled likewise with him, insomuch that Barnabas also was carried away with their dissimulation. But when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel, I said unto Peter before them all, If thou, being a Jew, livest after the manner of the Gentiles, and not as do the Jews, why compellest thou the Gentiles to live as do the Jews?" What we see here is a clear and present issue. Peter is intimidated by this circumcision crowd, much like he's intimidated by the people who question him after Christ's arrest, and he doesn't want to confess that he's a Christ follower, and he denies Christ 3 times. Much like that situation, Peter is intimidated by the circumcision crowd. This very bold crowd that causes a lot of problems that comes from the church of Jerusalem. They come out of James's church, and this crowd is intimidating so much that Peter just kind of folds. He gives in to what they're teaching, and he doesn't outwardly say that what they're teaching is right. He is not going around and preaching on their behalf, but his actions are speaking volumes. And so Paul comes into the picture, and Paul sees what's happening here, and he sees the fact that Peter's actions are speaking volumes. And maybe it's not spelled out for us in verses 11 through 14 here, but Paul faces this choice, this situation here. Peter is a giant of the faith, and at this point, Paul really is a no one. Paul is an up-and-coming preacher. Paul really has some massive issues with a lot of the believers at this time because they don't trust him. He was a persecutor of Christians. He was a persecutor of the faith, and now he is a Christian. We know he'll go on to be an amazing Christian who's a church planner and just following the Lord and running his race and doing what the Lord has called for him to do. But in this moment, Paul is faced with this massive problem, and he has a choice to make. Is he going to deal with it, or isn't he? Now, as we look at verses 11 through 14, we almost see no hesitation. Paul sees a problem. Paul deals with a problem. Paul withstands Peter to the face because it's what needs to be done in the moment. Peter's actions are negatively affecting the cause of Christ, and Paul takes care of business. Can I tell you today, that so often in our lives, we see situations and we see problems in front of us that need to be dealt with one way, but instead of dealing with it in that way, we let our anxiety get the best of us. We let our laziness stand in the way, and we say, you know what? I'm not going to deal with that right now. I'm going to wait. I'm not going to deal with that right now. Maybe I'll deal with that another time. Maybe someone else will deal with that. Maybe someone else will take care of that situation. This could come in many different forms. It could come in church problems. It could come in family issues. It could come in marital issues. There's so many different areas of life where you could see this spring up. Problems that aren't dealt with, and problems where we just kick the can down the road. I heard that there's a massive difference between buffalo and cattle. When a cow sees a storm coming, what the cow will do is run from the storm. And what happens is that storm gets over the cow, and the entirety of the time that the cow is running, it's getting stormed on. The cow is staying through that storm for the entirety of that storm. But a buffalo, when a buffalo sees a storm coming, you know what the buffalo does that's so different from the cow? He runs directly into the storm. He runs at the storm. He deals with the storm head on. And as a consequence, as a result of running into the storm head on, the buffalo runs right through the storm and gets to the other side. You see, the cow kicking the can down the road, running away from his problems, has to deal with the problem even longer. The buffalo running into the problem, dealing with situations, it's solved. He's through it. Things are resolved in that situation. And so maybe in our laziness or maybe in our anxiety, we say, hey, I don't want to have to deal with this issue. But truly, when we kick the can, all we're doing is dealing with the issue even longer. Listen, if we see a wildfire, we're not going to walk away from that small little wildfire and let it grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger. We want to put it out when it's small. When we have a problem, when we have an issue, we need to deal with it immediately so it doesn't explode, so it doesn't become a wildfire. No more kicking the can. Let's get serious about dealing with today's issues today. This hour's issues this hour. This minute's issues this minute. Let's get serious. Let's get serious about dealing with problems and not kicking the can.